Hello, I'm Peter Machin. Welcome to my podcast. Felix Laband is an electronic musician and visual artist who works extensively with cut and paste techniques. I spoke to him about his creative processes, the impact of giving up recreational drugs, and how growing up in South Africa has influenced his work. I hope you enjoy this conversation. And if you like this podcast, please share it with everyone you know. And don't forget to click on the like and subscribe buttons. Here's me and Felix. Hello, Felix Laband. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Peter, how are you? Lovely to talk to you too, man.
I'm pretty good. It's really good to see your face.
Lovely to see yours too.
So I'm going to kick off my many questions. So Felix, I've been listening to your music quite intensely for the last few days. Obviously, I've known it for many, many years now. But I remember the last time I interviewed you, like, I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago. And I remember having the same issue in a way. And my issue is this. So I experience your music in a particularly visceral way. It occupies my body as much as my head. And a lot of time it's more kind of biochemical experience than it is any kind of intellectual processing. Um, and in fact, I actually struggle with wrapping my brain around what your music means and what it does. Um, which is kind of weird because I think your music's very cerebral, but it's also almost got this kind of physical aspect.
Yeah.
So I have an odd but very obvious question. What are you trying to do with your music?
Yeah, I'm trying to
Sorry.
basically, I'm trying to basically like, I don't know, create like a space into memory and sort of dreamlike state, but at the same time, there has been obviously this kind of physical aspect to it, which is governed by a rhythm and stuff like that, which is which also in many ways helps it translate to a lot more people because a lot of people are quite inexperienced with music that doesn't have any sort of rhythm to it in this modern age,
Yeah.
and in fact it's an interesting question because there's been many a point where I've wanted to actually experiment with just having music on its own without, I mean, still having rhythms in the sense of the musical sort of ideas, but without sort of actual beats and bass and stuff like that. And it's almost like I've kind of at various points sort of almost chickened out, I suppose, kind of, where it's sort of like I'm about to release it and then I start messing around with some beats and stuff. And there's the other I don't know if the word problem is the right word, but having to perform, especially to modern audiences who, in a context generally of being in some sort of environment where there's people like before and after you playing quite intense house music or this or that, it's quite a difficult experience performing and then sort of just like breaking all of that and coming in with sort of just sort of ambient type music. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
resulted in me kind of I suppose, yeah, being quite fixated with that aspect of the music too. But that has been a bit of a problem for me in many ways, in the sense that like it's 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 kind of like it's not really. I mean, I listen to all sorts of music, but I don't find myself listening to too much like dance music and stuff. And I found sort of like trying to kind of like bring that aspect in as well. Sort of you know, it was something that was much easier for me to create and do also whilst using drugs and stimulants, to kind of give you that energy to do it, because it's quite difficult
Yeah, yeah.
to do without, and I sort of feel in many ways that I sort of like not like flogging a dead horse, but I feel like a lot of my issues that I've had with using stimulants and stuff to work have been exacerbated by that, in a sense, kind of like trying to get myself into that mood of, okay, I'm gonna make some beats and stuff, and then, obviously some drugs and and then you're away, you know. So I'm quite
Yeah.
interested to see where I'm going to go going forward, because obviously I've stopped doing all of that and I'm sort of entering a new space in my life where that is no longer a factor whatsoever. And I'm still struggling to make music, um, but I think it's because my mindset hasn't really opened yet to the possibilities of where I could go, and I assume it's probably going to be a lot more music without beats and stuff, you know, because I feel like that's almost like in the same way as when like when you're a teenager, you listen to fucking punk rock or whatever, and then you get a bit older, you kind of go through stages in your life where certain genres kind of help with the states that you're in at the time, you know, and how you see the
Yeah.
world
Yeah.
and stuff. And I'm not too sure whether or not like making people dance on ecstasy is something that interests me much longer, you know. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what I was going to say, because this is complicated by the fact that a lot of people, when they listen to the music, even if it's not beat-based music, are on drugs. That is,
Yes.
one of the contexts in which, this kind of, specifically electronic music, is consumed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in fact, you kind of led to about 10 of the questions I'm going to ask with that response. But I think the central thing for like any musician, but like I think especially for someone like you, is that tension between what you want to do and an audience.
Yeah.
Considering what an audience might want or demand or be open to. And obviously, you're not the kind of person who is going to, focus exclusively on, satisfying the needs of your audience. Now, I realize that, but at the same time, music is for other people to listen to. So, like, how do you resolve that tension between what you think people might want, what they actually want, and what you want to make?
Well, I think I'm quite lucky in that sense, in that I have had a fair amount of time making music, and thank God have had a fair amount I don't know if success is the right word, but I've been able to do it as my career, and I feel I don't really need to prove too much any longer. I've released enough albums, kind of doing what I generally do, and I don't know. Like, I mean, and as your question as well, it's not just an audience. There's many other factors as well. There's record labels. There's this and that. There's all
Yeah,
sorts of
yeah, of
people who
course.
expect a certain thing from you, and quite candidly can sometimes, like, you can send something off that you think is magical, and they're like, no, like, where's the kick drum, kind of
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and I think the only way that I can honestly deal with that is just to be brave and basically do what I'm currently doing, which is literally taking some time off from music in general and just kind of reassessing what's important to me, and kind of letting music find its way back to me naturally. And I feel like it is starting to do that. And I feel as well that possibly the future involves being a lot more interested in possibly making stuff for soundtracks, to films and documentaries and stuff. Because it's also like we live in a time, especially with electronic. I mean, I was very lucky when I started releasing electronic music. There weren't that many artists around, so like if you did something that was fairly decent, you could actually get some airtime and get heard, and luckily for me, when I first released 2001, it was still that landscape. There were, I mean, you could literally go into, I don't know if you remember in South Africa, but like a Musica, and there would be like Ninja Tune CD. You know what I mean? Like you had,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and so I was lucky to release in that sort of. I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like being a young experimental type producer now, just with a huge vast amount of work that you have to compete with that gets uploaded like every single day.
Yeah.
And
Quite
anyway,
everything.
yeah, and that also leaves me feeling a little despondent just in the kind of music world in general, kind of where we've gone with things like Spotify and this and that. I mean, I've seen such interesting videos of older people explaining how important, like an album used to be and all this type of stuff. And even for that, I mean, I've always worked with the idea very much of like an album being very much like a film, where it has a beginning,
Yeah.
a middle, and end, and that was very important to me, kind of to create this kind of like full listening experience. And I've had to basically accept the fact that that really kind of no longer exists. even in my own listening,
Except,
it's like,
yeah, I mean, so the only time I really listen to albums, and I listen to albums a lot, is when I put on a record.
yes,
Like,
yeah,
and sometimes on YouTube, but like otherwise, but like I also like I completely get what you say, but I also don't think the album is dead for the very
no,
simple reason that artists around the world in their tens of thousands continue to make albums, and maybe three
absolutely.
or 4% of the audience listen to those songs as albums.
Well, absolutely. I agree with you, and I still think it's a beautiful art form, and I shall not leave that. But where I do feel that people will listen to like a full album is if you made the soundtrack to a film, because they're going to watch the whole film and therefore listen to the whole body of work. So I'm sort of kind of
Yeah, yeah,
reassessing like how best I would like people to be able to appreciate and take in the music, and I'm just trying to open my mind a little bit more to those avenues because I think I mean, there's certainly still amazing films being made and this and that, and it would be, I don't know, the world of electronic music in terms of like DJs and fucking TikTok and this and that, it kind of like disgusts me sometimes. Like I open my thing and
yeah,
there's these,
yeah, yeah.
and it's like, I don't want to be part of that. I don't. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of veering more towards trying to make more inroads into the world of art and films where many different ideas can be expressed, where it's not just music, it's also political ideas and this and that. And I'm just finding the landscape of sort of electronic music as we know it, like like very limiting, and it's kind of been
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a little frustrating,
Yeah.
to be honest. Yeah.
So I mean, I just do want to counter that with a little. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I also think like that the music industry has always been pretty shit from the perspective of artists.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you're David Bowie,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that kind of level, like they were still screwed over.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just think it's the nature of the relationship between art and commerce is that we get screwed.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, reflecting the broader economic models in the world. Anyway, um, but yeah, so my other response is that in a way I feel like you've always been making soundtracks.
Mm.
Um, it's just that the movies don't exist. Your music feels incredibly cinematic. It feels like I'm sitting in my lounge listening to a record. It feels like the movie is happening somehow.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that is also due to the fact that quite a big um, proportion of the music I'm making is based around actually sampling from films and documentaries and stuff. It's not super obvious, but it's kind of there in the background, and there's many like textures and maybe little vocal excerpts and stuff that are from films and documentaries or various things I like. And I kind of like to sort of I use that quite a bit to try and tell kind of stories. Sometimes they're a little bit nonsensical, and sometimes I'm very much into kind of changing the sort of context of things as well. You might have a vocal sample that's quite like poignant in what the person is saying, but the music is opposing that, and sort of creating these weird juxtapositions like that. But I really do enjoy that aspect to making the music I do, which has been able to tell a little bit of a story, also using some vocal excerpts and things like that as well. And sort of
Yeah,
sound
yeah, yeah.
recordings of places I've been and stuff. I think it's quite a big aspect to what I enjoy, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing that I do understand quite easily about your music is the very layered nature of it. The collagey nature of it, which you talk about. I think quite
Yeah.
often. Um, and I think obviously, in fact, I thought I had all of it. I thought I had most of your records, but I have three of them. But I just think that okay, that the artwork is so incredibly beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah.
And that it's really just it's also there's me. It's also not separate from the music. It's an extension. Well, I mean, for me, it kind of is part of the same story.
Yeah.
Is your visual expression just part of the same thing for you, or is it kind of separate category of creation?
No, I mean, I think, well, very much. I like to always say in interviews and stuff that I see it all as one language, basically that of collage. I mean, my music is very much like that. It's kind of made up of bits and pieces that I've cut and stolen and reassembled, and then bits of my own making. And my art's very much the same thing. It's kind of cutting from various different sources and adding my own input into it. So I see it all as one language. Although I must say, I am a little bit more at ease, I suppose, making art. I don't know how to express it, but it's more of like a cerebral thing. I can kind of just get lost in it. It's kind of whereas
Yeah,
the,
yeah,
the the music thing is quite well, maybe actually, now that we're talking about it, maybe if I wasn't using beats, it wouldn't be so physical. But it's been quite like a physical. It's like physical and cerebral at the same time, and maybe it's also just because of the pressure, I suppose, of having released things and then having to obviously, keep doing similar type things or whatever. That I don't know. It seems to take a lot more energy from me than I find just like making physical art, which is kind of like it almost just happens like without much thought. It's just sort of it's very. And I must
yeah,
also say, as a child, in terms of habits and things like that. Sorry, in terms of talents and stuff, drawing was most definitely a much more natural talent than ever than like playing an instrument or something. I really
okay,
loved music,
that's
but when
interesting.
I started playing instruments, it wasn't like I just picked something up and could play. I had to learn,
Yeah,
and whereas art for me was just totally natural. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, analogically, I'm definitely a natural writer, but I find moving things around on the page, whether it's a physical page or like a virtual page or a screen. I find design and visual creation much easier than writing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm not sure why. I mean, it might just be like a simpler thing of dealing with like a simpler, two-dimensional reality. I'm not sure, but
Or maybe it's just that that's the thing that we are known for and getting paid for, and therefore it just requires like so much more kind of insecurity, of like I want to get
yeah,
this
maybe
right or something. I
that's
don't know,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, because I'm pretty confident in my visual output. Until then, I have to exhibit it. Then I do get a little bit,
Yes, well, I had a
nervous.
similar type of thing. I just used to do it for my own pleasure and luck, and then suddenly I just started exhibiting, and then it all kind of suddenly started getting a little bit more difficult. It's funny putting things out in the public space. Like and I think I'm struggling with that a little at the moment in the sense like now that I don't have I think I've very much used drugs and stuff as a kind of way to deal with my insecurities and stuff and just sort of numb myself to any real thought of what other people think or whatever. I just get fucked and do my stuff. And now that I'm kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
stone cold sober, it's kind of like I'm trying so hard to get out of my head, because my head is like my worst enemy.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 I mean, that is the great challenge. I speak to Roger Mellon about this, and his reference is such, no exit. There is no escape.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel I can kind of maybe like escape sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we are largely stuck in our own mental realities.
I actually asked him a question. I was like, these worlds that you're creating and stuff, like, are you able to like kind of turn that off at the end of the day and, go back to being yourself? Or, I mean, not just. And I think his answer was like, yes, he can. He sees it as like sort of work and he comes in and does it. And then he's like, if I'm not mistaken. But I was kind of
Yeah,
surprised because I was expecting a different answer of like, no, this like nightmare goes on all night or whatever. And he was quite like just simple with it. And I was like, oh, shit, wish I could
yeah.
do that.
No, I think he might be more pragmatic in the way he lives than you and I.
Yeah,
I can never switch anything off. Everything is just an endless blur of leading into everything.
yeah, myself.
Um, but back to collage, is because like I have one question. Like, Well, two things like so collage, and composition are very closely related.
Yes.
Collage depends not just on its medium, on its elements, but on its composition in space.
Yes. Yeah.
But the other thing is that South Africa is a very layered and collage society, I think. And my question is, do you think that the collage elements in your musical and visual work are influenced by this kind of very multitudinal nature of South African reality?
100%, absolutely feel that, and like I've had these sort of debates in my head, sort of fucking not regrets, but sort of things like, imagine if I hadn't fucking become, you know, a crazy ass drug addict, whatever. If I had just like gone on my first album and moved to Europe and set up a big studio and stuff, and then I think to myself, like, I wonder what work I would have made, and I wonder, and I think my answer is that like the chaos and all the aspects of South Africa that are just so like full on nonstop, like the nonstop like guilt you always have, being a privileged person and facing that every fucking 20 minutes, on literally on the street where someone's fucking asking you for
Yeah.
something, and the obvious disparity between everyone and everything. I think it's such a huge vital aspect to making the work I do, because it tries to basically somehow kind of sum this up in my own way, yeah. So I'm turning this phone down, and I definitely feel that yeah. I mean, even now, I sometimes sort of. I mean, there's many aspects of South Africa that are deeply depressing in terms of we just don't have. We have an amazing culture, but it's also quite. It's not like I can go and sort of watch some experimental ballet or something. That doesn't exist. And there's no.
Yeah.
And I sometimes get quite depressed about that, and I think like, fuck, imagine if I was staying where you are in Berlin, whatever, and all the things that I could
Yeah.
experience and stuff, and how much that could actually probably affect my outlook and broaden my horizons. Because, I mean, I think that's the issue. There's always dilemmas with everywhere,
Yeah. Of
So
course.
I'm trying to open my mind to that going forward, because I definitely I want to. I think once my creativity starts coming back in confidence, I really want to nourish it, and perhaps that is maybe traveling for a bit and just trying some other places and some other experiences, because there's something also kind of like morbidly depressing about staying here as well, which I think sometimes also like gets to my work in terms of like, what's the point? I don't know. I don't know if I'm expressing myself properly,
Yeah.
but
No. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if there's a correct expression of that, but I mean, I get it. Like the reason I live in Berlin is culture and
Yeah.
the huge amount of money that they spend on culture. At the same time, there are lots of experimental works being produced in South Africa, but
Yes.
there's no stage or audience for them. So
No.
South Africa does have this incredible, cultural production and like virtually no audience. In
Zero.
Berlin, like everything is sold out pretty much.
Yeah.
Everything gets an audience.
Yeah.
Everything gets a standing ovation. Everything is bravo. With
Yeah.
Russia, there's the other side of it. But it's just great that I can go and see world class art, regularly.
It is great, you know what I mean? And it's great that if you are somebody making experimental stuff, that you have a future doing it, and you're not just limited to. I mean, literally in Cape Town at the moment, we have like one venue that's basically allowing for experimental places, and all of us who play there play for free, because there's just no
Yeah.
budget, and it's tiny, the little room, and the audience will be pretty small. I mean, it's a great vibe and it's cool, but it's not like I can just imagine it being very disparaging for a young, like seriously excited, creative person. It's quite difficult.
Yeah. No, totally. And it can be heartbreaking, especially as I say, because of like the huge amount of creativity that there is.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think that's completely valid. At the same time, I mean, I do think that you get, as you've suggested, you get an incredible richness and understanding of the world from growing up in South Africa.
Yeah, well, I think also particularly if you don't just I'm living back in Cape
Oh, yeah.
Town, which is a bit of a weird experience. But if you've spent a significant amount of time in Johannesburg and Durban and places like that, the real South Africa, then you get a good experience of being here. And certainly, like a lot of my work that I've created in Johannesburg, and a lot of the energy of Johannesburg, and that is definitely, especially that album that you were showing earlier, that Def Safari, that was definitely a Johannesburg album. I was like very invested in the culture at that point in time. I was still like playing a lot and going out, and my audiences were very, very cool. It was just always really interesting African characters who were super supportive to me, and it's really kind of I felt very South African at that point in time. Whereas at the moment, I don't know how South African I feel. I mean, I am, but I'm sort of, I've kind of, sad to say, lost a little bit of like the energy I once had to, be super clued up on everything that's happening culturally here. I've kind of almost lost a little bit of touch with that.
I mean, at the same time, it also, feels like South Africa has become a less inclusive place.
It has. It literally has. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, we both. I mean, you're older than I am. We both went to. I finished school as apartheid ended. You finished just before. It's like we had that experience, and then there was the amazing period of like the early 2000s where it was so exciting and everything was like
And
going to be so
everyone.
great. It was like wonderful. And certainly, it's probably when I made some of my most interesting work, and it's slowly just gotten more and more. Yeah, but I mean, I literally found when I left Johannesburg, I was starting to feel like unwelcome in places. Literally just because of how I look.
Yeah.
And it definitely was not like that for a long time. It was really exciting.
Yeah.
And I think the most terrifying aspect to that at the moment in South Africa is what's happening with fucking this terrible fucking shit we're having with everybody fucking wanting to get rid of like all foreign African nationals and stuff. I mean, it's actually
Yeah.
quite
It's heartbreaking.
yeah, it's really happening on a huge scale now, and it's quite
Yeah.
awful actually. Yeah.
And I feel, for most of the last kind of 20 years that, our government in various capacities has fed directly into that, narrative. About,
Yeah.
Foreigners taking jobs and, damaging the economy.
Well, I have
And,
no
in
experience
exactly the
of
same
what it's
way-
like in Berlin, but I can see from my social media posts, it seems like similar stuff is happening in Germany, and you kind of
Oh, yeah. No, it's bullshit. There is, since I've been here, there's been this refugee crisis. But, like, there is no refugee crisis. Refugees are still a tiny, tiny percentage of the total number of people in Europe. And also, all of these, European countries, have, shrinking populations. So they reach out to other people to come.
yeah.
So it's just, it's really, exploitative manipulation of, people's fears and insecurities.
Yeah,
I think.
and I mean, I don't know. I mean, I suppose I'm asking a question like if it is the reality, but from what I've seen and I know like our social media stuff is very fucking, I don't know what exactly is the truth or not, but I mean, I keep seeing all these, or have been seeing for some years now, all of these videos of like fucking, just like the most insanely ridiculous, like fucking police action against like people supporting Palestine and shit in Germany and stuff. I mean, it's fucking shocking. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I think two things. Obviously, like social media puts a lot of focus on those specific
Yes.
events.
Yeah.
And I think it has shifted over time. But I mean, it's a really complicated. It is a really complicated conversation. But I felt like when the attack against Israel first happened, I immediately thought, oh shit, what's going to happen now?
Yeah.
Within a week, and like I felt that I was living in a more surveilled society.
Yeah.
With just within that week of it first happening, about what you can say, what you can't say, and I found that very disturbing.
Yeah,
And my immediate feeling was it started to feel like the old South Africa. And I'm not suggesting in any way that it was, but
yeah,
just that feeling of state intervention in public morality, like I found deeply disturbing, and I still do, around the world.
yeah. No, it's shocking, and it's like it's kind of. I mean, that's the one thing that also I think we take for granted so much in South Africa is. I mean, my proudest South African moment probably ever was when we fucking took Israel to court and stuff. I really was like, I thought that was just fucking amazing, and certainly amongst a lot of the geopolitical voices that I watch on YouTube and stuff who discuss all these things. We suddenly had quite a high standing amongst everyone in terms of our morality, and certainly here. I mean, it's great to be in a country that is majority pro-Palestinian. You know what I mean? And you can, we kind of forget how free we are to actually voice our opinions and stuff here and say whatever we like. You can be very critical and whatever, and you're not going to get like, I mean, what's happening in England seems ridiculous. The kind of stuff that you can get like arrested for, tweets and this and that and everything. And I mean, I'm very grateful to have that aspect. Of a society where you can actually, and generally we stand with the oppressed, and we very much can see the proper story. I'm quite
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
proud to be part of BRICS and all of this, and it's cool.
I mean, I just, like, even if, hypothetically we were all on completely the wrong page, we still be entitled to have that opinion.
I know.
And something that I just really, like, realized, and I'd like to do a whole podcast exploring this, is that, contained in all of that is what I call the politics of embarrassment.
Yes.
And I was just suddenly struck, and I remember it also relates a lot to growing up in South Africa, where pretty much all white people supported apartheid.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it wasn't like like most people, it was like 99.5% of the population. But I was just struck by how, say, in a filming or in a broadcast of a film or something, in the screening of a film, that it seems that the deepest upset is not moral outrage, but social discomfort,
Yeah.
embarrassment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That they're not comfortable with with the contradictory nature of what is happening.
Yeah.
And I think one thing about South Africa, well, I think two things about South Africa in that context is we're very good at dealing with with contradictory notions or
Yes.
things at the same time.
Yeah.
But the other thing that in South Africa, for so many years we've had so many different kinds of division, racial, economic, social, within race groups, heavily, um, hierarchical economies and stuff. But we've never had religious discrimination in South Africa. At the height
Yeah.
of apartheid, all of the different faith organizations marched together
Yes.
against apartheid,
Yeah.
and that's just something that I find very interesting about our country.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I was just recently living in Kenilworth. There's a mosque, there's a Jewish thing, there's this, there's that. It's all next to each other. It's all totally at peace with each other. There's no fucking. It's beautiful. And I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I really miss, and this could sound kind of condescending or even vaguely positively racist or whatever, but I just miss the sound of the azan, of the call to prayer. Like, it's one of the most beautiful, background sounds in
It's a
my
wonderful.
reality.
I love it. It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I know. I lived next door to a mosque in the Boer Kaap for about 2 years, and so I had that quite often. But it was, I love it. Yeah, it's incredible.
Okay, back to your music, Felix.
Okay.
And it's something that we were just talking about, a little while ago. But I want to ask you again, like, do you conceive of music or your music specifically as something that exists primarily within a physical space or primarily a mental space, or are those the same thing?
I think it's primarily in a mental space. There is the physical space sometimes, but I've actually sort of quite recently I've actually decided to listen to some of my work again as well, because obviously you get tired of it when you've already said and you stop. And yeah, there's definitely a physical space sometimes, most definitely. But it's predominantly a mental space. And I think that's been my saving grace in terms of, I've been releasing for like over 20 something years, and my, through all this social, the digital platforms and stuff, I actually have far more listeners now than I did, a while ago. And I think that's mostly due to the fact that people actually do listen to it, not just when they at a jaw, like they listen to it at home and that kind of stuff. And that works for me in terms of plays and support,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
So,
mean, I think that is a very important point to mention in terms of electronic music specifically. So, I mean, I love dancing, as I think you know, and I dance to anything. But I very, very seldom listen to dance music at home. But I listen to
Yeah.
quite a lot of electronic music, and a lot of it could be house, and I can totally dance to it.
yeah.
But just like heavy techno, even just like heavy house, no, I'm never going to listen to that at home. That's just not who I am. I'm more kind of a low register person.
Yeah.
Bring on Neil Young or Felix Laband, like.
Or Bruce Springsteen,
yeah, no, Springsteen. I mean, at the end of the day, like in my lounge, all of those things operate on the same terms and within the same parameters. And I don't see any substantial difference between you and Springsteen.
Oddly enough, I put a sound system in my car for the first time a little while ago, which was pretty amazing, like subwoofer and all. Like my whole boot has no space and stuff, which is been quite a really cool experience because you don't generally have that in the car, with the bass and everything. And I find I can listen to some sort of dance music in my car driving and stuff, But when I'm home and stuff, it's kind of like, no thanks. I'd rather listen to something, cerebral. Yeah, I've actually been listening to lots of classical music, to be honest with you, more and more in my life.
I have a question about that lurking.
Okay.
But I mean, I do think, and this might, it's certainly the case for me, and it might be the case for you. I think we both catch fire pretty easily. And if I do sometimes play quite dancey stuff, I get to activate it.
Yes.
I'm then like moving around at like 120 BPM myself around my apartment, and I can't really function. So I actually need quite kind of low tempo things to keep me stable.
Yeah, myself, Yeah, it kind of grounds me and takes me away, and it's beautiful. Yeah.
But it's interesting that you come to Springsteen, just because often when I'm speaking to like electronic producers, they often, like Springsteen often comes up in conversation almost as this kind of counterpoint, but also this kind of universal kind of the universality of it. I'm friends with like Larry T, the dance producer DJ. He wrote RuPaul's theme song, and he often speaks about just hearing a Springsteen song and he'll break down in tears. But he completely exists within electronica, and I think it's craft.
I also think it's that's possibly an age thing as well. Like for me, Bruce Springsteen was literally the first tape I ever bought was Born in the USA. That was when I was 6 years old, and it was so like poignant to me there. And I think there's like an emotional kind of like rawness to his music as well. But I think for me, it's something that it takes me back to a kind of naivety of emotion in my life. And I've noticed that, like I've tried sometimes playing it to youngsters and they don't really seem to get it as much, as
Okay.
yeah, I mean that's been my experience. But for me, I think his music is most definitely, it's like a nostalgia. I mean, it's also just the primal, like raw emotion of it in his voice, and it's just super like.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
And also, I feel even now that he is, as a person, as a musician, as a creator, determined to hang on to that naivety.
Yeah.
To never let it go. Like the songs, like even the nostalgic songs are in a way about nostalgia and the way that it fails, but also the way that it delivers. So yeah, but let's not go down the Taylor Springsteen rabbit hole. I want to ask you just a little bit about the Soft White Hand.
Okay.
It feels it feels a little bit more kind of global, and it feels a little bit like, and also moving on from Def Safari, like, but it feels like you start out very interior, like as a very kind of interiorly focused musician, and as as you've grown older, moved more and more outward into the world. So both of those, two more recent albums feel quite expansive.
Yeah.
My question is really: did you try with Software in Hand? Were you trying to make something that was had more kind of global references?
Um, yeah, I think actually, if I'm honest with myself, I had an experience that I think a lot of people have had, especially after Def Safari, where I was sampling a lot from kind of South African television and stuff like that, and kind of toying a little bit with South African politics and stuff, where there was almost the beginning of the stage of cancel culture, where suddenly, as a white, middle aged, privileged South African, I was suddenly told I'm not allowed to venture anywhere near languages or cultures that I apparently don't know anything about. And, as much as it infuriated me, like, I also kind of, it gave me, well, I won't say it forced me, but I started looking elsewhere in terms of the vocal kind of samples and stuff that I was sampling from and everything. And in that album in particular, I think that album was made possibly at like the very height and tail end of kind of my many years of addiction sort of thing. So a lot of the samples and stuff used there are actually, I sampled a lot from these kind of sort of 80s New York documentaries on the crack cocaine epidemic and stuff, So it's
Yeah.
almost like autobiographical in that sense. Not that I'm a crack addict, but, I just found their conversations quite poignant. And then musically as well, I ventured into territories exploring kind of classical themes and stuff, various composers, Bach and some others, which I sort of reinterpreted and stuff like that. And yeah, I think in that sense, it is a bit more expansive in terms of it's not like particularly South African. But I think what I like about that album the most is that it doesn't have a like one particular sort of theme. It kind of ducks and dives all over the place, and it also has a couple tracks which I suppose would be viewed as a little bit more experimental in some ways, which are just kind of weird and whatever. And I sort of allowed myself to be a bit more free in that regard and not be so critical of my own production and stuff. I think I spent a great deal of time when I was younger sort of getting everything perfect and this and that. And then I started realizing that that's what's starting to destroy music, and that's what's lacking in music is like the roughness and the mistakes and stuff like that. That's what
Yeah.
makes it personal. So I try to let that flow through a little bit more in terms of things not being overtly polished and perfect. Just kind of relatively sort of loose and raw. Look, there's a great, huge mound of work that I created during that period, which did not appear on that album, which is a lot more physical and dancey and this and that. And I think that had a lot to do with also subconsciously being affected by, sort of global musical tastes and sort of techno suddenly becoming the great big thing again and all of this. And I think I experimented quite a bit, sort of trying to fit into those spaces and see how I can work in them. But thank God, even though I was not entirely here mentally, I still had the capacity to be like, fuck that, and I cut it out. And I kept the album pretty quiet and minimal. And so now that I'm in a sort of sober state of mind, I listened to it recently and I was like, actually, I love this album. It's great. It's beautiful. So yeah, I'm pleased that I didn't rush into sort of releasing whatever I was making, you know, and I took my time as always. I
Yeah.
took my time.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I mean, I think that word considered, applies very much to your output. That that everything does feel like you've thought about it, um, quite substantially and given it time to kind of cogitate or to mature
Well, I
or
don't know. I'm a firm
what have
believer. Like my father is an author, and he is of a different. He just fucking keeps going and releases, and like I personally don't know how beneficial that is to an artist. I mean, there's certainly some artists that I've listened to, and I love them, and then they just start fucking releasing, and then they'll do that one album where they've decided to fucking sing or something, and it's like, bruh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I'll literally stop listening to them, you know. So I think even if it does take like many years, maybe it's frustrating to those waiting for the music, but rather that than just put out something mediocre that forevermore you're going to be like, oh, I wish I'd never released that or something, you know.
Yeah. Or even like I'm a massive fan of Will Oldham, also, Bunny Prince Billy. And
Yeah.
he's just relentless. Apart from his actual albums, he's just always putting out, B-sides and alternative takes and, tape versions and cassette versions. And it's still all good, but I just I can't consume it all.
Yeah.
And he's like one of the person I spend most of my musical time, but it's just too much, and there's so much
Yeah.
other music. So I do respect kind of constraint, and I'm not in any way dissing Will's right to do that. Like he's
Yes.
great, but like I also like just as a consumer, like one of my favorite singers is Mary Margaret O'Hara, who just made basically one proper album in the late 80s or early 90s, and she never made another one. And in a way, I'm just really grateful to her because I only ever had to concentrate on that one beautiful masterpiece that she created. And I don't have to buy every, second album, every album that's produced and so on. So,
Yeah, no, it is great, I think, sometimes. And I also think it's beautiful when there's so many artists sometimes that are, and God bless this, I hope this is not going to be me, but there's certain artists where, like, at a certain point, you should have just left it there and done something else, you know? Now you're kind of like killing your legacy, you know? It's like,
yeah.
well, I suppose it's similar things with fucking, these relentless fucking, remaking of films, and they have to have like 30 seasons, and the first two were great, and the rest of it just ruined everything, you know? But it's kind of, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember Richard Haslop talking about REM, breaking up or ending. I don't even know if breaking up is the right word. But he just described it as something like they basically just stopped the car and got out of it and started walking. But at the same time, he also says that they should never have, they have made a second album because Murmur was so profoundly brilliant. They should have just left it there. But I'm very glad they didn't. So,
Yeah.
But I just want to quickly go back to what you're talking about making African music or making music that that is reflects other people's influences.
Yeah.
So I mean, on one hand, I do feel that all culture is appropriation. That is what culture is.
Yeah,
we take
100%.
stuff and borrow from each other. But just don't be racist. Don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so this is a kind of different question. But for me, there's a smallness and a delicateness to your music that this paradoxically creates a really big sense of space. And I feel like maybe the great Malian guitarists do a similar thing, and even like my brain just died. Madal Kanani or Shannon Corbo, just like. I feel that your work, in some way reflects kind of those other sounds that I've grown up and that you've grown up hearing. I'm sure you're somewhere in the background. My very simple question is: how influenced are you by the many, many different musical forms of Southern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa?
Very, very, very. I'm also very good friends with Derek Gripper, and I've actually been making some music with him recently, which I'm quite excited about. And he is. He literally has played with, some of the great kora players and stuff, and he's just been on tour with Balake and those, and so he has introduced me to various stuff. But I definitely grew up. I still listen to lots of Maskandi music. I love Maskandi; it's one of my favorite South African genres of music, In fact, that's why I think we have such good house music, because I mean, Muscandi is basically like a 4/4 kind of. I
Yeah.
think and but I also very much love that West African sort of choral music and stuff. I've been listening to that all my life, and that's definitely had a huge influence on my music. I'm also influenced by very much, sort of Kwaito and South African house stuff, which is quite, well, it's a little different now. Obviously, Amapiano is a huge thing now, but it was very different to European house in its tempo and its kind of rhythm and stuff like that. And that's been a huge influence of my music over the years. I was very much, I've been quite a big fan of quieter music. In fact, I can tell a little story. Like when I was at school, I obviously hated being a South African, apartheid and all and everything. And I only listened to music from Europe, basically. And I used to date someone, Janine. In fact, you probably know her. Yeah, exactly. Her domestic worker's son I became friendly with, and he lent me this tape of this choir group called Brothers of Peace. It's actually Mosquito.
Oh, God.
And that literally
I
changed my fucking life, dude. I couldn't stop listening to it. And then I started getting into kwaito and shit. And then suddenly it was the first time I started embracing South African music. It was kind of like this is like sort of mid 90s, I suppose 93 or 4 or something. And I really got into it. Although I must say, not many of my friends did. It was a bit of a solo thing. If I'm honest.
Did you ever see BOP live?
No.
I saw them. They played at Flux New Year's Festival. They played a few times at KZN. I easily one of the best things I've ever seen. Just like incredible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Askido, I fucking love that guy, and like his label, like Kilawe Jazz Me, I've got a huge collection of. When I used to live in Joburg, you could go to like CD Warehouse and then you could just buy all these South African house producers CDs for like 30, 40 rand or whatever, and I just bought. So I've got a huge collection, and that's been a big influence on me, because it's a different take on on house music to the European kind of mentality or the American stuff,
I feel like it's wider and deeper, but also just more contained in life.
Yeah, and it's also just got like I don't know, man. It's like there's like a soul in it, and a kind of I don't know. I don't even know how to express it.
Yeah, I think soul might be a good word. Like, with deep residing. I just know that I probably haven't cried to any house music, but I've cried to like like African house music, right? It's just it's just I find it deeply emotional.
Dude, myself, and some of the best parties of my life have most definitely been in like places like 115 in Joburg, whatever, where it's a predominantly African crowd. It's you maybe like one of 3 other honkies there, and it's just the vibe on the dance floor. Compare that to fucking the vibe at 3:30. It's like it's just like another world, and it's lovely, and people are dancing and listening to the music, and
I mean, I don't think the party gets much better than a Joburg party.
Yeah. It's a pity. I miss Joburg, to be honest with you. I sometimes for just I don't even know if it's like to torture myself, but I'll wake up and I'll put on that track Alaska Accused, do, and then I start like dreaming about Joburg and stuff. And but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've heard rumors, or not rumors, that it's quite difficult to live there at the moment. Things are like rapidly falling apart and stuff, and I don't know. I don't know if I'll move back there for a while, But it's a cool place.
One thing for sure, the conversations are always super interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, one back to your music. Do you think so you spoke about classical quite a lot, and I can definitely have a strong sense of classical structures and compositions underlying your music. But of course, the other thing is jazz. So I just do you think you're closer to jazz or classical in terms of your approach? And is that a valid question?
Yeah, it's a valid question. I think I love jazz. It intimidates me a little bit in terms of like it's very skillful, and so when I was younger, I kind of was a little bit more sort of experimental and sort of experimenting with more jazz. I've just actually made a track more recently though, which is quite exciting. It's going to be released. My record label Compost. They do a compilation called fuck. What's it called? The sound of like it's like a compilation that comes out once a year of German jazz, interesting sort of contemporary stuff. And I
Okay.
actually released a track on that, which actually has a poem by Jay Savage on it, which is really cool. And I basically
Oh,
took
okay. Jason, yeah.
Brubeck's Take Five rhythms and I did it in 5/4, and I'm quite excited about that. That's been my most interesting experiment into the jazz space. I've definitely been watching loads of jazz recently. There's some fucking incredible experimental sort of jazz stuff that I've been watching here. There's a musician called Shane Cooper. He performs in Europe quite a bit. He's incredible, and so I've seen some shows by him. And then this other guy called fuck, I've forgotten. He's like this experimental drummer, and there's been some great stuff there. But musically, I think I've been listening to more classical music more recently, in particular choral music. I've been listening to a lot of Russian choral music, actually. In fact, I don't know what it is about it.
Yeah.
There's something about it that just is like it just hits a chord with me in the same way that Aphex Twin did when I was 23. It's like
Okay.
fuck, it's just like blows me away. Yeah, it's really incredible, and it's like I'm getting quite a lot of ideas from that and the kind of melodic structures of that, and I think if I'm honest with myself, that's where I would like to start experimenting more and more is with these kind of choral structures and really appreciating, when harmonies come together and how they can work together and stuff like that, which I don't think I've really explored yet, Yeah.
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 I think this is a relevant question. So I've noticed that many musicians, and I feel like probably maybe more male musicians or men
Yeah.
musicians, but I mean that's a separate thing. But like lots of musicians that started in quite experimental modes often gravitate toward classicism over time. Not necessarily classical music, but kind of classical forms, more classical structures. Do you feel that tendency at all?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in my own experience, I grew up with a father who only listens to classical music. I asked him when he started listening to classical music. He said to me, "Oh, when I was like 5 or something." Okay. But like, it's like there wasn't like one fucking pop record in his collection ever. So like, and so I kind of grew up, I suppose, not like hating classical music, but of course we always rebel against our parents and stuff. But at the same time, it's always been in the background, and it's kind of influenced me quite a great deal. And the older I've gotten, and the more open-minded I've gotten in terms of actually exploring the world of classical music, and the more exciting it's gotten for me, really.
Yeah.
And I think it also it just enables you to just be so much more expressive with melody and stuff, whereas when you have based most of your musical career on predominantly like rhythm, it's kind of it's quite freeing, Yeah.
Yeah. And have you seen much classical music live?
Well, that's the only problem with South Africa. It doesn't really
Yeah.
exist here, at all. In fact, I have managed to see some interesting stuff in Canada and various other places. Quite interesting experimental type stuff. I've seen one or two things here, but nothing grand. That's what I would love to experience in Europe because I know that there's so much of that
Yeah.
going on, and really great orchestras
Yeah.
and stuff, So yeah, I would really love. I mean, that to me has been like when I start thinking to myself what I want to do with the rest of my life and what actually excites me these days and stuff. I think actually the excitement I used to feel towards going out and taking 3 pills and dancing all night. I now I'd love to just go to some incredible church and experience an incredible orchestra, and it's over by 8 o'clock, and then you go home and think about it the rest
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. That's what's
But
exciting me. Yeah.
yeah. I hope you get to do that soon.
Me too.
Um, Felix, how do you feel about remixes of your work that other people have made? That have
I
been
have to
commissioned
be
by
honest with you. I fucking hate it.
you.
Yeah, sorry, but it's
I like
very
that answer.
yeah, it's very very seldom that like something gets done that I'm like, wow, that's incredible. Most of the time, it's like a compromise from my side. I never even like talk about my remix records, and I know a lot of it's done by like some really great artists, and I appreciate. But the whole remix thing is quite a difficult thing to do in the first place. I don't really attempt to remix that much because it's kind of like it's like why when it's already so great. I don't know. It's. I understand in some contexts is maybe when you want to translate something into something else, but like translating electronic music into another electronic music song is just kind of like, and
Yeah.
it's often just yeah. I mean, look, a remix can be incredible sometimes, but 80% of the time it's just fucking in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel so I think the places where I do enjoy them are where the original isn't in any way electronic.
Exactly,
Um, like
exactly.
uh, like Bruce Armstrong's remix album. I still far prefer the original, but it's a kind of treat to hearing them in different form. And then they're
Yes,
almost like more like covers rather than. Because I love
yes.
covers. I love alternative covers.
Yes, I also love
Um,
covers. Covers are cool.
yeah,
There's no like pretense of sort of making it your own now. It's like, okay, I'm taking the song and I'm just reinterpreting it in my own way. I mean, one of the
yeah.
best covers ever for me, ever made, is probably Cat Powell when she does that Satisfaction song,
Okay.
by the Rolling Stones. She never even goes into the chorus, she just kind of, but like, that's an amazing cover to me, I'd rather listen to that any day than the original. But yeah.
Have you ever heard? You know June Tabor, the folk artist.
Sorry again?
June Tabor.
I'm not too sure if I do know. Is
Yeah,
she
she's the famous British folkie from the 70s, I think from the 70s. But
okay?
she does this extraordinary cover of Love Will Tear Us Apart with the Oyster Band, Blue Oyster Band. I'm not sure.
Oh,
I'll
really?
send
Yeah.
it to you after this. Yeah.
Great. That sounds interesting. Cool.
I just want to quickly ask you about working with Derek Gripper, which clearly you enjoyed, and that song
Yeah.
Derek and Me. Within half a second, I like, obviously I know about you and Derek's relationship, but it was just so immediate which Derek that was. Like even if I
Yeah.
hadn't known. But how do you enjoy working with other people? Or are you do you?
I don't generally enjoy working with other electronic people. In fact, I've been notoriously difficult to work with. It's just, but if I'm working with somebody who does something completely outside of my space and does it in such an incredible way that I like completely admire and adore, I find it really like wonderful working with him. It's like he's got his space, I've got mine, and we come together really well. And then the closer we've gotten as actual friends, and the more I've actually gotten to know him and what he's all about and everything like that, it's quite a beautiful thing. We actually did some recordings which he wants to release, but we're having this argument because I'm being all pedantic about it, and I would prefer to possibly make something further, because I don't feel like we had enough time to really get into it. But that is most definitely somebody that I plan to really make something amazing with. I mean, I really respect the guy, and I love his passion for music and his skills and he's just a beautiful human being, and yeah. So we'll most definitely be releasing something together in the near future, Yeah, possibly when I get back from this little tour trip thing I'm doing in July, we'll settle down and start making something, I think, properly, Yeah, yeah, he's wonderful. Yeah.
Cool. And then I have a related question: Is would you ever work with a vocalist? Would you ever want to work with a vocalist?
Yeah, possibly. I Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm also there's a part of me that still loves like great pop music. When I say pop music, I don't mean like Madonna. I mean, like the Smiths or whatever, or like that sort of the Cure and all that kind of like I love verse chorus song stuff, and I would most definitely be interested in doing something along that kind of vein, sort of like indie, sort of darker, and possibly with a female vocalist. I'm generally drawn more to
Yeah,
female.
I was imagining it being a female vocalist,
Yeah,
just because in fact I've asked anyone one question, but there is one that I didn't ask, and it's just about. Let me see if I can find it. But it's basically about the inherent loveliness of your music, which is a kind of funny thing to say, but there is. Somebody writes, one reviewer writes, the band can't change its attraction to harmonic balance. And I know that you have a darkness inside you, dark parts, and that sometimes you can hear the darkness and you go away. But it seems like you always come back to the light, towards the kind of more gentle. I want to say affirming, the kind of upward register. Hey, do you think that's true? And also, is it something that you try to do?
yeah, it's most definitely true, and I think it's just. I think it's probably just maybe who I am, and that's what appeals to me. And it's kind of it's like when you are making music as well, particularly electronic music. It's very much a process of having to listen to something over and over and over and over again, and I suppose at the end of the day, the melodies that end up making it into tracks are ones that I can listen to for the whole day and kind of enjoy, And I tend to find when I venture into darker spaces and stuff like that, I kind of get like tired of the melodies quite quickly. And it's also, I suppose at the end of the day, I want to make music to enrich people's experience on this dark planet, And as cliches as it may seem, I just find that making more sort of pretty music is beautiful. Yeah. So,
Yeah. But I mean, that is like there must be said for beauty and truth, and I know that beauty and truth isn't always pretty, and I don't, I don't think that you make pretty music, but I understand why you use that
yes.
word
Mm.
specifically.
Yeah.
I'd say, I don't think your music's ever really pretty. I think it's more like gorgeous. I think pretty is just too light a word.
Yeah. Maybe I'm just being. I'm probably like.
But I understand why you used. I understand why you use the word pretty. There's a very specific word.
It's definitely a word that sort of contemporaries of mine, other producers have used to diss me. Oh, you're gonna play
I was
another
going to
pretty
say it.
track.
Well, I think that's why I'm reluctant.
Yes.
It's too pretty. It's too pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's fucking beautiful, Felix. Really.
Thank you. Yeah, and
Nothing
fuck them
to-
too, bro. They also need to just grow some balls and fucking, be able to be a little bit vulnerable. Then maybe people will listen to their music too, So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
you
totally.
Yeah.
I love. Like I'm going to say I love punk music. I don't necessarily love punk music, but I love the ethos of punk music. I love punkiness.
yeah,
And I also hate virtuosity on its own terms. If it's just virtuous and beautiful, it also does nothing to me. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
kind of between those two poles. But if you reject beauty, fuck you. Is what I say.
me too. I'm sorry, but it's like, what's the fucking point otherwise? I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's, fuck, it's, that's, I mean, that's what keeps us going, is it not, Fuck.
We live in a world that is dark, but also profoundly fucking beautiful.
Yeah, very profoundly
Yeah.
beautiful, And there's so many people, and I think that's the greatest thing about, sometimes, I mean, even in the world we're living in today, it seems so fucking hectic, and it is, especially considering there's all these nuclear weapons and things we have these days. But I mean, I always often, I'm super fascinated with the Second World War, and I just try and imagine how everyone felt then, or like that there was going to be no future and this and that. And sure, millions of people died, but at the same time, throughout all of that and everything, people were still making art and this and that, and it's kind of the beauty always that's the human spirit, and that prevails at the end of the day,
Yeah.
despite all the darkness, and I think that's what's beautiful about, and I need to remind myself that constantly, but that's what's beautiful about being part of that aspect of society that's trying to make something to fucking transcend all this other shit, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Shine some light.
Mm.
No, for me, I mean, I know life can be shit, but I think I find that kind of 95 to 5% ratio. I think it's profoundly beautiful, mostly beautiful, but we
Yeah.
focus a lot on the hard stuff. But
Yes.
as long as there is light coming through the leaf of a tree, that is enough for me. That's
Yeah.
enough to be alive. Just a little bit of beauty, and there's so much of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And
I think that's a great place to end our conversation. And I know
thank you,
do
Peter.
something
It's been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it. It's been really great. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Felix. Thank you so much for talking to me. It's been really lovely.
Thank you, Peter. It's been lovely talking to you.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Felix. For more conversations with creative minds, check out talktopeter.com, where you'll also find playlists, recommendations, and other useful resources. Have a wonderful day or night, wherever you are in the world, and thank you for listening.